Hello everyone, welcome back to MgM. I'm Jimmy, and today we're going to paint up some Veil Touched for the upcoming miniatures game Ravaged Star by Mini Wargaming. Ravaged Star is currently in development, and I'll post links below so you can check it out for yourself. More than likely, if you've heard of me, you've heard of Mini Wargaming and therefore Ravaged Star. I had the opportunity to play the game with Matt at Adepticon. I really enjoyed what they put together and have since backed the release on GameFound. Matt did send me some miniatures ahead of release, and today I'm going to paint up a few and give you my opinions on the line. Now, these miniatures are absolutely gorgeous, and the amount of detail they have is pretty crazy. They were designed by Lazy Squire Games and Mini Wargaming. The Veil Touched in particular are packed full of details, and I'll go as far as to say that painting these miniatures isn't for the faint of heart. The models are full of trim, and even the trim has trim, so it's very hard to find a way to speed paint or cheat my way through it. That is why I've elected to go with a silver base coat here, either from a rattle can or brush on. I went with plate mail metal from the Army Painter. The first paint I use is a speed paint by the Army Painter called Slaughter Red, and I use this to go over the panels. I tried numerous methods, from a slap chop type of approach and trying to paint all of the trim, and I found it just works easier for me to go ahead and base coat that trim at the very beginning and work on the other things around it. Now, if you are a pro painter, these models are going to be absolutely incredible for you and what you can do with them. For an average painter like me, it's easy to get discouraged and lost in the amount of detail they have, but hopefully, if you're new and starting out, this guide will help you, and that is who it is aimed for. Now, I'm trying to take this nice and slow for the camera, but you can obviously go a lot faster than this. It really doesn't matter if you hit onto the trim at this point, because we are going to go back over later and tighten a lot of that up where we've spilled over. I found it easier to try to get my base coats out of the way first, and then come back and tighten up the silver, and then we'll move on, turning that to a more bronze kind of a color. For color schemes, you can really do what you want. I elected to go red here, but I have seen a lot of purple color schemes, black color schemes. It is really up to you. There is no right or wrong way to paint these models. I find, for me at least, when working on miniatures like this, it's good to just take things in bite sizes. Work on things for maybe 30 minutes every other night. Maybe come in and, do a base coat on a model, and if you still have some paint on your palette that's wet, you can work on another one. But really just letting that time add up and not trying to push myself to do too much at once. I will say that I absolutely love speed paint on these miniatures, at least for these initial base coats, and you can use contrast paints or Vallejo Express as well, but the reason that I like these is because they flow so well into the recesses. Instead of trying to push just regular acrylic paint around, these just really kind of get into all the nooks and crannies at the very beginning, and it's like you've put on a paint and a wash at the same time. Now, these are all of the areas that I painted red, and I know what you're thinking. You could have sprayed it red and then went through and did all the trim, but it just depends on kind of how you want to attack things. And I am just not one to paint trim. I don't really enjoy it that much, so I went with painting the panels instead. Now, you will notice that a little bit of the silver is shining through, and if you like that, fantastic. That is not going to be the finished result that we're going for, however. The next paint that I grab is going to be Grim Black, which is another speed paint, and I do paint the cloth sections in different colors. For some of them, I went with more of a tan, more earthy type tones, and then for some, I did some in black, so really make these whatever color you would like. You will see a little bit of the silver shining through here as well, but don't worry about that because that is something that we will tighten up in the last step with a dry brush. There are a few pieces of cloth on these miniatures, at least the ones that I'm painting, one that goes around the legs, the midsection, and then you'll have some up around the shoulders. I will also use Grim Black to get the armored undersuit that they're wearing, the inside of the knees, the arms that aren't covered up by any kind of armor, as well as some pieces on the legs. These Death Chaser models also have a Doomsayer blaster, and I'm going to use Grim Black to get some of the casing on of that as well. So with that complete, you'll be able to see where I've painted in all of the black, and again, we're not going to worry about that metal shine through right now. That is something that we'll take care of at a later step. The next color is going to be the Army Painter Skeleton Bone, and we're going to use this color to get the horns, as well as any horns or bones that are protruding from the model, and there's quite a few if you look around. I'll rotate the model around so you can get a view. There's some on the shoulders, there's some on the back. You could easily make that red as well. The shoulders, and then they also protrude on the front, the knees. And for the Death Chasers in particular, there's some on the arms, but there's a lot of bone, horns, and things that are poking out on this model. The next paint out is the Army Painter's Magic Blue. This is another speed paint, and I'm going to use this just to get a few things on the backpack. Now, I'm not sure what this stuff is, I'm not sure what it does. What I do know is this Magic Blue looks really good going over silver, and it is going to give you a really good base coat and a highlight all in one coat. I also use this color to get his blaster, and then I even go through and fill in the eyes with this color as well, as they, more so I was going for them having a glowing kind of effect. With that complete, we're now to the stage where we want to tighten up the trim. So I do get plate mail metal from the Army Painter. This is what I used as a base coat from a rattle can. I'm going to go through and just touch up on a few areas, and you don't have to be absolutely precise with this, because what we are going to do is lay a speed paint down on top of this that is going to give it a bronze kind of a tinge. It will darken down any red area that it touches too, so if you don't get all of the areas, it's not something that you have to worry about. I'm just going through and tightening up some things where I see. I don't really spend a whole lot of time doing this, maybe just a couple of minutes. A good example is the iconography is what we'll call it, and where I just filled that in with red earlier. Now's a good time to go back with your plate mail metal and kind of make those areas stand back out again. Okay, with all that silver tightened up, we go to kind of the secret weapon, if you will, and it's the Army Painter's Speed Paint Hardened Leather going over the metallic. And this is what is going to give us that sort of bronze, darker look. So any place where we have the silver showing on the trim, you can go over with this and use it almost like a wash, and it is really going to tone that silver down to that bronze, copper kind of a color. In addition, this is going to leave a little bit of shading on the red areas or whatever that trim is touching, and therefore we will not have to use a wash on these. If you happen to spill onto the red, it's not a big deal. It will darken the red down a little bit as well and look like shadow, but we are going to go through towards the end and tighten up the red a little bit as well, so I'm not that worried about it. You can really apply this fairly liberally. So again, one of those things where just take your time, work your way around the model, picking out all of those silver details, and it's really going to start to bring the model together. I find that in using this method, trim on the weapon and things like that just really aren't that big of a deal to paint anymore, as I'm simply just kind of washing over it, if you will. And to be honest, this step is a lot of fun. It's fun to see that silver kind of just really darken down into something that is not so bright anymore. Our next step is Army Painter Gravelord Gray. It's another speed paint, and I'm going to use this to go over any areas that are metallic. If they have grenades or anything like that, that would be this color. This is another advantage of priming with the silver. So the weapon will get that, again, any kind of grenades or anything like that, and this is a great filler color. So if you're panning the model around and you still have areas that maybe you need paint in, you can dot this color in there and it will provide just a nice shade. I'll use this in particular on the area on his gloves that kind of go into those horns. I'll kind of dot this in there just to darken it down a little bit in the recesses. Next I go in with Army Painter Soft Tone. This is a brown wash. You could easily use Agrax Earth Shade if you're in the Citadel line, and I use this on all of the bone colors that we painted previously. And this is really the only technical wash that I use. The rest of it is really speed paint. And at this point it feels like our miniature is really coming together. Now, some people said that they do like to see this kind of silver, this metallic shining through on the armor, and if you do, fantastic. You're almost to a place where you can stop and just completely skip the step. For me, I did want to go through and kind of brighten that up a little bit, and I went with Army Painter Fanatics. This is their pure red, and you could really take this as far as you wanted to using their triad methodology. For me, I'm just going to go through into those red areas, kind of where light would really be hitting the surface, and I'm going to give it just a single coat of this, kind of bringing it down from the top towards the bottom. Again, I'm not a pro painter, and I think that's obvious, but for me, it just gives a little more depth to the red. While I'll be stopping here on their reds, if you wanted to push this even further using their triad system, you could continue to go up and continue to blend and add highlights to this as you see fit. If you're a newer painter, maybe trying some of these techniques for the first time, where you're trying to avoid the recesses and things like that, if you happen to make a mistake and spill over, you just know it's not a big deal, because you could go through with any of those speed paint colors that we used previously, the red, the black, the Gravelord Gray, drop that into the recesses and it will tone it right back down again. So once again, just take your time here, working around the model where light would be hitting it the most. That is where you would want to see this paint being the strongest. And once you're done, it will look something like this. Now up close on this camera, you're going to be able to see everything, all the brush strokes and all of that. But from 2 feet away on the table, I can assure you he's going to look pretty good. I'll bring in kind of what the model looked like previously, as this is another model that I was working on, to where we are now. And you can see that there's a massive difference just using basic painting methods. Up next, we're going to go back to the Army Painter Skeleton Bone. We are going to use this to just touch on the horns and the bones that are showing through on this model, really focusing on where light would be hitting the model. So focusing on the tops and leaving the darker color in the recesses and on the bottom of the horns. For the areas that we painted magic blue, I do go through with bright sapphire. This is one of the new Fanatics range paints from the Army Painter, and I give those just a real quick highlight as well. For the base, I go with Army Painter Sand Golem and just go through and get some of those details. There's bones and skulls that are on the base, so that is perfect here. It is a little dark, and they do make pallid bone and some other colors, but we're going to highlight this with a dry brush, so this darker color will do just fine. I then go back to Gravelord Gray, which is that speed paint again, and just work that around, getting into all the nooks and crannies and darkening that base down. Once that dries, I go to Vallejo Iraqi Sand, which is one of my go-to colors. I absolutely love this color to dry brush at the end to add weathering. And I not only hit the base, but I do go through giving it a little bit of a harder dry brush on the cloth areas, and I also go over the entire model, kind of giving it a weathering, dusty type of effect. This will pick up on all of the edges, giving them a highlight. It will make the black areas, or if you used a brown, it will make that look weathered for the cloth areas. It will tie in the base, and it will also highlight your bone colors kind of all in one go. So I am being a little harder on the cloth areas, but not so much on the armor areas. That is a bit of a lighter dry brush. And once complete, our Death Chaser is ready for the tabletop, and it is something that took a little bit of time. I'm trying to figure out a way to speed things up, but with the amount of trim on these models, they are gorgeous, but they do take some time to paint. This is one of the final glamour shots. That is another Death Chaser in this unit, and then I'll also throw up some of the Eviscerators that I recently painted as well in a similar scheme. Well, hey, really hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial. I'm really pulling for Ravaged Star, and I hope the game does well. I am all for games that are made for gamers by gamers. Again, if you'd like any information on the game, links will be down in the description below. And Supporters Club, your names are flashing on the screen now. Would really like to thank you so much for your support. It's by no means necessary. If you watched the video this far, you've done more than enough to support my channel, so thank you so much. I'm going to continue working on painting these guys up so we can do some battle reports in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.